What's up, I'm your local pleb, and since it's close to Halloween, I wanted to make a spooky video for the channel that I've actually done a long time ago on my Hyperheim's channel. I did a video about my top 10 favorite Pokemon Creepypastas. I just love how people can get creative with these stories, even if some come off as more cliche than others. I wanted to remake this list for a while, and that's because I genuinely love Pokemon Creepypastas, or PokePastas as some call them. Plus, since it's that time for spooks, it's no surprise why I shouldn't do it now. Even though I have another scary video planned at some point later. Oops. Before I start, I do want to mention that I have another YourLocalPleb video in the works, but I haven't gotten time to work on it because of productivity and scheduling issues. But don't worry, I'll get to it soon. Oh yeah, and I can't forget, this list is filled with my opinions. You may agree with some, and you may disagree with others. Also, if you want, feel free to tell me what some of your favorite Pokemon Creepypastas are in the comments below. But let's finally get started with this thing before the spooky season is over. Let's start with a pretty recognizable Pokemon Creepypasta, but one I believe has a pretty cool yet haunting concept. Pokemon Black. No, not that one. Pokemon Creepy Black. We have to throw in the word creepy in front of it so we don't get confused. Pokemon Creepy Black is a tale where someone buys a bootleg Pokemon game from a flea market since they love collecting bootleg games. This game, however, was relatively normal when comparing it to the Generation 1 games. However, there's a few big differences. Firstly, after getting your starter, you start off with another Pokemon in your party. This Pokemon is known as Ghost, which is actually the ghost you see within the Pokemon Tower without the Silph Scope. This Ghost is overpowered for two reasons. Firstly, any Pokemon that tries to fight you with Ghost at the front of your party will be unable to move because they're too scared to attack. Secondly, they only know one move being Curse. No, it doesn't cut your HP in half or lower your speed and raise your attack and defense. No. This move will instead erase the Pokemon you're currently fighting from existence. Even when fighting against a trainer, if you use Curse on one of their Pokemon indicator thing, which tells you how many Pokemon they have left, will just have one of the Pokeballs disappear, indicating that they didn't just faint, they're legit gone. It doesn't even stop there. After beating a trainer, the battle can continue and you can choose to either run away to make the battle end normally, or use Curse on the trainer themselves, and yes, it erases them too. Unfortunately, you can't use it on people that you have to fight again in the future like your rival. Also, you can't use it against Ghost Pokemon too. However, after our protagonist beat the game with Ghost, the game would then transition many years later. The character he was playing as suddenly turned old and was near tombstones in Lavender Town. They would soon return home and come face to face with literally every single thing you use Curse on in the game, from Pokemon to trainers. And at the end of it all, you had to fight your own Ghost. Yeah, there's no way you win. After struggling with the fight, Ghost would use Curse one last time, and it would fade to black and then erase your save file. I love this creepypasta, mainly because I always admired Ghost in Generation 1. Their sprite looked ominously haunting, the concept of not being able to fight it because other Pokemon would be too scared too was an awesome callback to the Lavender Tower battle, and what's interesting is that the protagonist said that they played through this game again, never using Ghost to kill Pokemon or trainers, and while the sprites never appeared at the end, it would always end in your old character losing their life to Ghost, as if death was unavoidable. Kinda makes you think that Ghost is some sort of a Grim Reaper character. This entry is technically two entries, but that's because they're related. The Buried Alive model and the White Hand sprite. Let's talk about the White Hand sprite first, also known as Whithand.gif. This was a Pokemon who originally was supposed to spawn on the third floor of the Pokemon Tower like the other ghosts in there. It was basically a hand that was showing bone and decaying flesh. It had 4 animations, one for coming out, an idle animation, and 2 attacks that were removed from the game, which is known as Fist and Brutal. Now, this is relevant to the other story, Buried Alive model. This story is about a boss that you were supposed to face at the top of the Pokemon Tower. However, they were removed and replaced with a Marowak ghost instead. Encountering them would spark the dialogue, "You're here. I'm trapped. And I'm lonely. So very lonely. Won't you join me?" After that, the battle would immediately start and their sprite would look like a human corpse trying to dig out of the ground like a zombie. Their team is relatively simple. They have a Muck, a Gengar, and 2 White Hands. If you were to beat them, then the game freezes. There was never a code in the game for the battle to finish if you won. Now, if you lost, however, they would exclaim, "Finally, fresh meat," and then a game over screen would appear with the sprite of Buried Alive, who is also known as Berryman by script, would drag the player down with them as they devoured the player. Even creepier, even if you turned off and on the Game Boy after the game over screen, it would always load up on that game over screen. I like this story because I could have seen this becoming a thing to some extent. There's a lack of ghost types in Generation 1, so I wouldn't be surprised if they tried getting more creative at one point, but removed White Hand because of its creepiness. Also, different dialogues do exist whenever you win or lose a battle. The only example I can note is your first rival battle. The ending dialogue will just be different depending on if you lost or won. Even the concept of a game over screen in Pokemon instead of just whiting out or blacking out is pretty creepy. While I think that the game over screen basically ruining your whole save file is pretty ridiculous, I'd still say that it's a unique story. Something you may not know about me is that I have a personal hatred towards Unknown. They're just my least favorite Pokemon, but this story actually makes a usage out of them that I genuinely appreciate. Pokemon Lost Silver is about someone who bought themselves a copy of Pokemon Silver for only $10. I'm actually pretty jealous. When starting up the game, they noticed that there was already a file on it. When they checked it, it definitely wasn't the most normal thing to see. They were already inside of what seemed like Sprout Tower and had 6 Pokemon. 5 unknown that spelled L-E-A-V and E, which spells leave, and a Cyndaquil named Hurry, which had only 1 HP and knew the moves Leer and Flash. After wandering for a bit, they would soon find a ladder that would lead them to a dark area where they couldn't see. Not only that, but the music went from silent to playing the creepy radio song that plays in the Alpha Ruins where the Unknown live. The player uses Cyndaquil's Flash to bright up the room, and it reveals a red room which only led down one long pathway. At the end, there was a sign that said turn back now with a yes or no option. The player selects yes, and then the screen turned black again. The music changed to the solemn Pokeflute radio music, but the game had said, Hurry has fainted. They went to check their Pokemon, but now there were 6 unknown in their party that spelled H-E-D-I-E and D. He died. If you thought that was interesting, I'm not going to try and read the whole thing in this video because it's pretty long but pretty interesting, but I'll just leave a few quick notes of what happens next in the story. Eventually, the player's sprite would become super white and pale, and their arms and legs would be gone. They'd eventually have a new team, 5 unknown spelling D-Y-I-N-G, dying, and a level 100 shiny Celebi that had 1 arm, 1 leg, and 1 eye and only had Perish Song. Eventually, the player would fight Red, who was transparent for some reason, and had a sad-looking Pikachu. The fight would soon end with the both of them dying at the same time, and then the player would warp back to his house as a transparent ghost. After being able to float beyond the walls of their home, they would soon find Red again, who says, goodbye forever. Something who's named with 3 question marks would use Nightmare, and then the player would appear in the hollowed out grave room again. His final team was 6 unknown spelling I-M-D-E-A and D. I'm dead. And soon the game would show one final text box that says R.I.P. I think the story is awesome for a few reasons. For example, even if it wasn't a hack, anyone could sell their Pokemon games, but before they do, they could mess with whoever buys it and tries to get them stuck or make them freak out through some smart ways, resulting in them having to wipe their save file. Also, the utilization of Unknown is genius in this story, because they somewhat answer what's going on throughout the whole entire story. All in all, this story is so dark, mysterious, and amazing. The mind is a critically powerful thing within the human body. It can create dreams, imaginations, amazing ideas, and terrible, terrible hallucinations. This is Pokemon Fuchsia, a game that seemed like an ordinary, cool, unofficial Pokemon game at the start, but was only a lie that would be soon discovered. Our protagonist was in a mall with his girlfriend, and she wanted to get him something cool for his upcoming birthday. They would soon walk into a pawn shop that had a good amount of video games. While looking at the Pokemon games, the protagonist sees a game called Pokemon Fuchsia, and noted that he's never seen this game before. Promptly, his girlfriend buys it for him, and he goes home prepared to play it. The purple cartridge with the swirl of colors was almost mesmerizing. When he got home, he started up the game and was interested to see Koga instead of Professor Oak at the start of the game. Apparently, this was a game that focused on Fuchsia City in Generation 1. The player would soon meet a character called Janin, who's actually Koga's daughter and had seemed to be your girlfriend in the game. She said that today was the day that you fight Koga. The player checked his team and had a level 40 Nidoking and Nidoqueen. However, right as the player was about to fight Koga, Koga tells him that he isn't ready yet and needs the player to go to the Safari Zone library for the truth. He'd soon find a scientist in a lone room and was instructed to follow them. Turns out, Pokemon in the Safari Zone were created by a big computer in fear that the Safari Zone would run out of Pokemon. However, it goes on about how Koga was power hungry and forced Oak to recreate every single Pokemon that existed, and the original Pokemon died because of the new Pokemon created, and it gets confusing fast. But surprisingly enough, that's not even the most interesting part. After falling asleep and waking up the next day, his girlfriend confronts him and says that he wasn't picking up any of his calls or texts in over 2 weeks. Why exactly was this the case? Well, there's a lot of more juicy details in the story, but I'll skip to some of the more important parts. He would play the game again to try and get his mind off of what was happening after going to the doctors and tried beating Koga. After losing over and over again, the player would somehow capture a glitch Pokemon called EXP1 and uses that to beat Koga. However, it seems that the player had become the new tyrant of the city instead. Oak would then try to tell the player to get rid of the Pokemon and would end up battling it, but then wakes up before doing anything. His girlfriend would soon take the game away from him. He tried to get it back by driving to her house, but it was revealed that she had been unconscious on her floor. How did this happen? Well, it turns out that the game never worked at all. It was all in our protagonist's mind. Apparently, ever since he was a kid, the protagonist had these blackout episodes and delusions. This showed when he played with his Game Boy, but played no games, just looking at a black screen. He would create these new original storylines so that the game would never end for him. It was even confirmed that he was the one that assaulted his girlfriend so bad that she went into a coma. Soon, he'd be admitted into a mental hospital and was even told that his girlfriend soon died after being admitted into hospital. He doesn't even believe it, though. I'll be honest, while the story seems pretty convoluted, I think it's great because it pushes the concept of what stories our own minds can create. We can create our own universes with personalized stories for other Pokemon or trainers, but it can really show how much it can blind a person's senses. It may seem ridiculous, yeah, but dreams, imaginations, and anything like that can usually never make any sense, and I think that's the genius of the story. The bond between a trainer and a Pokemon can be magical. However, much like losing a pet or even a friend, grief is something that people can't get through easily, and some people hate it. Pokemon Strangled Red really shows how it feels when you lose someone you love, even if it is just within a game. The story starts with our protagonist finding a Pokemon cartridge within a trash bin before the garbage man could trash it. The title screen of the game showed Pokemon Strangled Red version, confirming that it was just a hack. There was an option to continue, but the game denied them by saying, no. After starting the game, the protagonist realized that he wasn't given a chance to name himself or his rival. The game immediately started up and you were playing as a character called Steven and had a level 5 Charmander named Miki. He would soon find another trainer named Mike, who was the player's rival. In fact, they weren't just rivals, they were actually brothers. That's pretty unique if I'm gonna be honest. They had an argument about which is better, Charmander or Squirtle. Bulbasaur, by the way. They then have their first rival fight, and Steven wins since he attacked on the first turn. After leaving the house, this was apparently a prequel story to the original Gen 1 game, since you could go to Red's house, and Steven lived in a separate house, and his mother notes how Red looked up to him as a role model. Steven went on with the adventure using Miki in practically all of the battles he went through. The story was a bit different, but the gameplay was practically the same. The first weird occurrence that happened, though, was when Steven said that he had no reason to be at the Lavender Tower. The protagonist would soon make it through the rest of the game and beat the champion as well, who was, of course, your rival, Steven's brother Mike. However, after beating him, the screen faded to the both of them at their house. Mike wanted Steven to trade Miki to him for his Pokedex to be completed. A yes or no option appeared. After the no option didn't work, the protagonist hit yes and they started the trade. However, as Miki was going through the trade tube, a harsh snap was heard and the screen just completely crashed. Then rebooting the game and pressing continue, the text 1 year later appeared on the screen. Steven was shown inside of the Pokemon Tower mourning the death of his Charizard, Miki. Not only that, but his sprite changed from the young, confident trainer to a blank-eyed, messy-haired shell of a trainer. Even playing as Steven during this time was sad. Other NPCs were concerned, and wild Pokemon would just ignore you instead of fighting since you had no Pokemon. Steven would soon go to bed, but now is where the story gets crazy. Steven wakes up in the middle of the night, mumbling that something can bring Miki back from the dead. He called it the Missing One. Yeah, that's right, Steven is going to use Missing No to revive Miki. Even without Pokeballs, he just took Missing No after finding them at Cinnabar. Steven would use Missing No on the grave that Miki was at, even prompting the iconic quote, "In a world that cheated me, why should I play fair?" And would obtain, M $, which was Miki, but wasn't like how they were before. Steven's last stop was to Pallet Town, and he had turned into a soulless monster at this point. He stopped in front of Mike's bed and had one option that glitched Miki could use: Strangle. After selecting it, a loud snap was heard and the game ended. This story shows how much someone can lose their sanity over losing someone that they hold near and dear to their heart. Sure, some can handle it easier than others, but others can really lose their minds over it. Maybe the addition of Missing No might have been cliched, but it also goes to show how far someone's willing to go to try and bring their friend back from the dead. I love hunting for glitches within video games. But have you ever asked yourself, how far can something go where it can't be considered just a glitch but something more? I felt that when reading the story Glitchlet. The story starts with our protagonist playing Pokemon with their friends. After seeing and doing practically everything in the game, they would soon discover Missing No. Now the whole group was enthralled with trying to find as many glitches as they can. This is where Glitchlet comes into play. To find this Pokemon, you'd have to do a pattern that was similar to how you would get a lot of glitch Pokemon, like talk to an NPC, fly to an area, whatever. Glitchlet was a Diglett that relatively looked normal, but their face would be in the style of Missing No. Glitchlet had varied results for others. One said it messed up his game so bad that he couldn't play it anymore and had to reset, but others said Glitchlet crashed the game whenever they were sent into battle. The protagonist had the best luck with their Glitchlet using Dig and having infinite PP, and it basically one-hit KOing every single Pokemon. However, it gets stranger. When their Glitchlet took a hit at low health, their cry was loud and longer, and text appeared saying, "Diglett was killed. Do you want to use the next Pokemon?" After that odd occurrence, the protagonist noticed that he can now use Dig outside of battle. Apparently this glitched Diglett was hurting itself with Dig, but considering how far away the exit was in the unknown dungeon and the rest of his Pokemon were low leveled, he used Dig. They ended up warping to a glitched out Diglett's cave with all of his Pokemon except for Glitchlet gone. The walls were swelling and flexing, and the music was a high-pitched, horrible version of the Diglett Dugtrio chant. Soon a level 255 Dugtrio would appear, and its cry and sprite were disturbingly glitched. The game would take control by itself, himself, and the Glitch, Diglett, and Dugtrio would fight. However, all of Diglett's moves were replaced with the words, "No hope," and the Diglett was soon killed. The player continued trying to escape, but the next Dugtrio that he encountered ended up fighting the player since he was all out of Pokemon. The game would then suddenly power off as the batteries had died. While I kinda don't like the abrupt ending to the story, I admire how the story takes what feels like a realistic glitch and cranks it up to 100. I also like the inclusion of the Diglett Dugtrio chant in the game, but just more scary than normal. I love hunting for glitches myself, and I'd even be scared if I found this. Do you remember in Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green on the 1, 2, 3 islands that there was a girl that Hypno tried capturing? I'm pretty sure that's how it went. Well, let's take that and turn it into a nightmare. The tale of Hypno's Lullaby is by far the shortest story on this list, but that's because it's not really a story. It's actually a poem. In short, it's about Hypno wanting children to run away from their homes to be with Hypno to play with them forever in the cave. However, it's all a ruse and they want to abduct them and mind control all of them. You think that's creepy? You should actually listen to the song that this poem associates to. Trust me, reading the full poem is way creepier than just hearing it in a summary. But this story is short, sweet, and definitely creepy. It really goes to show how terrifying a Pokemon could be. Hypno is definitely a mysterious Pokemon, and this poem just gives me really a lot of chills. Would you risk your pride, effort, and dignity just to let your rival win one time? The story of Wally put into perspective how your rival could feel when he tries and tries his hardest and always fails against you. This story starts with our protagonist saying that Wally is his favorite rival, which is just perfect for this story. He finds his old Pokemon Ruby cartridge and wanted to load it up for nostalgia. His team of Blaziken, Groudon, Rayquaza, Salamence, Absol, and Banette were there. They were going through Victory Road to go to the Pokemon League to swap out some of their Pokemon and expected to see Wally bump into them along the way. However, Wally was just waiting there for them. The protagonist was unaware if this was possible because of poor memory, but they didn't really care. As they were about to face Wally, the game suddenly flickered and Wally suddenly disappeared. They shrugged it off, but suddenly the Pokénav rang, which was a call from Wally saying, "Come to Petalburg." Then he hung up. Curious, they decided to fly to Petalburg City. The weird thing was the whole area was foggy, and all of the colors looked dull. They went to Wally's house, and many NPCs were standing on the front yard. They said pretty sad and depressing quotes like, "This shouldn't have happened. I thought he was doing so well, and we thought he had beaten it. He looked up to you." The last NPC, being his mother, said something more long and disturbing compared to the others. The damp cave air aggravated his condition. He strained himself to become better so he could finally be as good as you, but he pushed himself too hard. His body gave out. A hiker found him, a Pokeball clutched in his little hand, his Pokemon refusing to leave his side. He called us using Wally's nav. Do you know what it's like? Being informed by a total stranger that someone you love is dead? Pay your respects and leave. This is all your fault. The player would then walk up to the casket, and a dialogue box would appear with the word, "Why?" Then a battle would start. The player had to fight Wally, but Wally was pale and looked sad. Even the dialogue box said, "Pokemon Trainer Wally wants one last battle." The player decided to defeat Wally, and the battle ended with Wally saying, "Why can't you let me win?" Wally's mother would then kick the player out of the house, and the screen would cut to white with credits. However, the last thing on the screen was a picture of Wally with the text, "In loving memory." This story, while not as scary compared to the others on the list, is a lot more sad and truly made me feel bad for Wally. Wally was one of those rivals who was fueled with the passion to be better than you, and they would try their hardest. If I was ever in that situation, I would never have the stomach to try and defeat him again. It makes you really think if there's an alternate ending where you let him win so he can rest easy. What does Kyurem and Zekrom make? Kyurem Black. What does Kyurem and Reshiram make? Kyurem White. So what happens when you fuse Kyurem with both Zekrom and Reshiram at the same time? Hole again can actually kinda answer that question for you, but I don't think it's an answer that you'll enjoy, to be honest. Our protagonist wanted to buy a copy of Pokemon Black since they recently gotten a Nintendo DS. They spent the next few weeks playing the game, having a team of Superior, Zebstrika, Simipour, Chandelure, Aldino, and Reshiram. They even got a Zekrom for the Grand Trade Station. One Pokemon they really wanted, however, was Kyurem. After beating the game, they rushed their way over to the giant chasm to find Kyurem. However, things started to become strange. The protagonist should have emerged into a cavern where Kyurem would be waiting. However, they instead ended up in some sort of a tunnel that took a sharp turn left. After taking the sharp turn, there were writings on the wall which told the story of Kyurem. Kyurem was the original body of Zekrom and Reshiram before the dragon split up. Kyurem, now as a husk, hid away deep within the underground of Unova. However, when the icy meteorite crashed into the earth, it stirred the Pokemon from its slumber and now snatches anyone close and eats them to make themselves whole again. After going forward more, the player would read different messages that said, "Get out," and "Don't go further." Soon the screen went black and text appeared saying, "The dead never sleep. Kyurem wants to be whole again. Kyurem then appeared, and the player sent out Reshiram. Reshiram tried to use Fusion Flare, but Kyurem moved first and used Sheer Cold, one-hit KOing Reshiram. The player tried to swap to a different Pokemon, but everyone but Reshiram had vanished from their party. However, the Zekrom he got from the GTS was also in his party as well. Zekrom, however, would soon meet the same fates. The player was ready to turn the game off, but the game told the player that they could still send out Reshiram and Zekrom. They were at full health, but their health bars were both red, so the player sent out Reshiram again, and boy, that was a mistake. Reshiram looked different, with the sprite being mangled and bloody. Flesh was peeled away, and some of the skull was exposed. However, Kyurem looked quote-unquote better, since their wrinkled skin looked more smooth and its stance was more upright now. Before the player could do anything, text appeared saying, Kyurem wants to be whole again. Reshiram would suddenly hurt itself until it fell with the text saying, Reshiram died. When the player sent out Zekrom, not only did they look as terrible as Reshiram did, but Kyurem was looking even better than before. Soon, Zekrom died as well, the same way Reshiram did. Soon, more text appeared saying, Kyurem is whole again. Do you want to add this Pokemon to your party? The protagonist said no, and more text appeared after the game looked as if it were frozen, saying, I see. That's too bad. The Kyurem would then roar at the screen with the roars of Reshiram and Zekrom combined as it lunged toward the screen, making the protagonist back away in horror. They would soon notice that the game had been erased and they shut off the DS. I love the concept of Kyurem and how they can fuse with Zekrom and Reshiram. This story just adds a whole new level of mystery and horror with the concept of combining both of them at the same time. It's like Zekrom and Reshiram loved being their own separate beings, and it's scary seeing that freedom being eaten away by Kyurem. It makes you wonder what the game would be like if you use Kyurem in their true form. Something I believe that can make a story powerful is making the person reading the story feel a sort of feeling. This goes beyond fear and sorrow too. There's one story I've always held close to me to this very day, and that's because I always feel the temperature decrease around me whenever I think of it. While people may think Easter egg Snow on Mount Silver may have its cliches and problems, I'm still marking it as one of my favorite Pokemon Creepypastas of all time. Not only that, but I think it's the longest story out of all of them. I'll try and summarize it because this video is definitely long enough. Our protagonist and her brother grew up with Pokemon and did tons of things within the games. However, they recently got interested in cheats and hacks when they got a Game Shark. After going through Gen 3, she'd play through Gold and the brother would play through Silver, but with a Game Shark. After some days of playing, the protagonist wanted to get some Pokemon from her brother for trades. However, when she checked up on him, his Pokemon games were scattered all over the floor, destroyed. His Game Boy Advance was also on the floor in pieces, and the brother was sitting on the corner of the bed. The brother would murmur, "Oh god, white everywhere," and then black. He had soon lost it and tried smashing her own GBA with a hammer, but she ran away. Her brother was soon sent to a psyche ward for 2 days. What made him go insane like that? Our protagonist wanted to find that out after his brother wanted her to get rid of his games. When she entered his room, she found a notebook that was filled with different cheat codes. She noted that one code was labeled Easter Egg, Snow on Mount Silver. She loaded up the game with the code, and everything was barely visible as it filled with static. She quickly checked on the team, and it had a Typhlosion, Feraligatr, Meganium, Pidgeot, Tyranitar, and Lugia. After checking, the screen had gotten a bit more visible. It was a heavy snowstorm raining down. The player in the game kept saying words like, "I can't run away. I can't go back. I can never go back. I'm cold." The more she walked up Mount Silver, Pokemon in the party would occasionally die. Pidgeot has died, Meganium has died, everyone was dying, and their sprites were changing in grotesque ways. The only Pokemon left alive was Typhlosion. She would soon reach the summit and find a grotesque Celebi instead of red. Celebi used Perish Song, and a screech came from the GBA, causing the screen to go white. The screen changed to some sort of a chamber, and she'd soon encounter Red. A battle would start, and Red sent out what his normal team would be, but everyone was disturbingly ripped and torn like corpses. The bodies fell one by one, until Red had one Pokemon left, Pikachu. This is, in my opinion, one of the most terrifying Pokemon sprites I have ever seen. They look destroyed and rotted, but it looks like they're happy as if their grin is frozen in place to be a smile. The battle ended with Pikachu using Pain Split on Typhlosion, and they both went down. Red would finally speak, saying, "It's over," and something would use Destiny Bond. The game made an ear-piercing, terrible noise. There was white everywhere, and then black. There was silence. She would soon throw the game, notebook, and everything like that in the garbage. However, she wanted to check her Pokemon Yellow version first. She turned it on, and Pikachu was normal, with the classic cute smile that we all remember. The brother would never play Pokemon again, and the sister would only play without them being hacked. That winter, the snow fell thick. This story made me feel cold and terrified. Any variants of these sprites look phenomenal, the story is great, and the game is mysterious and horrifying, and it's all just genius. Please give this story a read, or play one of the fan games about it, or watch the fan-made movie. I absolutely adore this story, and it will always hold a cold and creepy place near my warm heart. thank you all so much for watching this video. I loved rereading up on these stories and researching them. I'll leave a link to all of these stories down in the description so you can get the full experience of reading them for yourself. But anyways, thank you all so much for watching. I don't really know how to end videos like this because this is on this channel and not Hyperheim, so I guess like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe, hit the bell, and why not comment what your favorite story was and what other top 10 videos you want me to make. But I'm your local pleb, and we're all plebs at the end of the day, and that's why I love you.